Welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe. I'm an advisor, author, and general explorer of the service and experience space. My guests tend to have just released some interesting research. They run a company that has some interesting tech in the service and experience space. They are part of an organization that is doing some cool stuff, or they run their own business doing interesting things for both their customers and or their employees. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Martin Gill, who is VP Research Director at Forrester. Hey, Martin, how are you doing?
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, Martin, crumbs, he says, kind of like nearly pulling you. He's kind of like, it's live.
Off to a great start.
But no, it's fine. We'll keep that in because it's just like, it's just for comedy value.
Yep.
So, you're a first timer on the podcast,
I am, yes.
So for the benefit of our listeners and our the people that catch up with the highlights and stuff, can you tell me a little bit more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, so my background is very storied and random. Started off in a shipyard on the River Tyne and ended up research director for a global research firm. So you can kind of go look at my LinkedIn profile to work out how that happened. But Forrester is, if you don't know Forrester, we're a global research and advisory firm. We run one of the world's largest consumer surveys. So we survey something like 200,000 consumers globally across 20 different countries. We survey executives. And we take that data and we augment that with analyst insights from analysts who used to be practitioners in the space. I run the international CX team, so I cover the APAC and EMEA region, and one of my colleagues covers the US region. Okay. And really, we look at how firms can create better customer experience teams, better processes like measurement processes, journey mapping processes, etc.
Perfect. Now, thank you for that. So, I know that you have a summit, in fact, an EMEA summit coming up in June. Now, this should go out sort of early May. So this is a bit of, I've been able to get a sneak preview of what's kind of coming up. So can you give us the headlines, sort of a preview of what to expect at the event and what's the sort of the overall theme?
Yeah, so 2nd to 4th of June, we'll put some links, and I think we're going to share a discount code as well if anyone wants to come. But I'm going to talk about the theme first, and we can talk about like how we're going to bring this to life a bit later in terms of like workshops and experiences and things. But so the theme is total experience. So if we take a step back, we know that we can show through our research and our data that CX scores are declining. Customers' perceptions of the experiences brands are giving them is declining throughout the world. It's falling dramatically in America. It's flatlined in Singapore, Australia. It's starting to dip in the UK and many European countries. We've got trended data back 15 years to show it's gone up and up, and now it's dropping. Yeah. And the reason is, firms are failing at the basics. Behind our CX index model, we have a driver model, and it asks a bunch of fairly actionable questions like, does the agent answer all my questions? Do they communicate in plain language? Is the website easy to use? And all of these things are dropping. Right. A lot of the drivers associated with how easy it is to get things done are getting worse.
Right.
And we think that's really about the complexity brands face. So there's more and more touch points, there's more and more experiences. We're worried about AI, about chat, about voice, about what's coming next, haptic interfaces, augmented reality. And the reaction we see a lot of firms having to this is to try to do everything on every single channel. Or worse, force customers onto channels that they don't want to use. Right. COVID digitized a lot of things. And so the overall customers are finding things harder. It's harder and harder for customers to get things done. So we've been measuring that for 15 years, right? We also, for about 5 years, have been measuring brand experience, brand energy. So in customer experience, we measure ease, effective, and emotion. What's that? In brand, we measure fit, salience, and trust.
Right.
We measure those things separately. Most organizations, most other research organizations, et cetera, out there, keep those things separately. So for the first time this year, we've run a single unified survey where we've brought the customer experience and the non-client experience, the brand experience, together into one single score.
Okay.
We're launching that score or that index in the US event, so that's at the end of June. But the European event comes first, and we're not going to launch the data in Europe, but we're going to talk about bringing these two things together. So how essentially you set brand expectation on one side and you deliver against it with the experience you create.
And I mean, I think the thing that it strikes me when you talk about the customer experience index and how things have been either flatlining or declining, and actually it's all about companies not delivering on the basics.
Yeah,
and for me, it's a thing that I've been banging on about and written about for a longest time. It's like the idea about being brilliant at the basics and how people don't do that. And actually, more often than not, the people that are lauded for their customer experience are the ones that do that, because what they understand is that if you're brilliant at the basics, it establishes this foundation of trust and credibility, and people come back, and it becomes this. You just become reliable, right? It's just that sort of thing. Like I pick up the phone, or I can send you a message. You're like going, "Oh, you're going to respond. You're going to be there, like a good friend or a good, a person that sort of thing." You just feel like they're like,
yeah,
I can count on them.
Reliable is such an interesting word. So when we analyze emotion in the customer experience index, and when I say emotion, most brands go, "Oh, joy, we have to delight our customers." Actually, the emotions that most impact, we can prove this through the data. The emotions that most drive loyalty in your customers for most industries are confident, understood, respected, valued.
Yeah.
Do what you say you're going to do. That's it.
When you say you're going to do it.
Right.
In fact, I have a poster in my office which has got all that as an acronym. Kind of do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. People look at it sometimes and go, "What does that mean?" I'm sorry. Then you explain it, you're like, "Oh." And it's something I wrote about in a book, sort of thing. And it's one of those simple things, right? It's just like, just deliver on that. Now, I think one of the tensions in that is that oftentimes being brilliant at the basics is not sexy.
Yeah.
And it's not de jour, right? And it takes time and effort and commitment. And I always find that there's just this tension. And I sort of talk about it, and tell me what you think about this, is that I say to people from time to time, I say that the future of customer experience is always built in the present.
Yeah.
And, what I mean by that is that, if you don't attend to people's problems now, then you forego or put at risk the opportunity to build on that sort of relationship tomorrow or the day after. And within all of that, I think there's this tension with brands around what they prioritize. Too often people are you talk about, it's not helped by complexity, in that they end up almost focusing on the tomorrow bit and don't necessarily spend as much time on the today bits, the problems today, and attending to those sort of things. But the people that win are the ones that actually balance those conflicting sort of priorities, like planning for the future, but they're making things better today. I mean, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it gives me quite a few thoughts, but one of the things we see, and I think we'll talk about measurement in a bit as well, but we see a massive overfocus in CX teams and executive teams as well on a metric, focusing in on getting obsessed with the score rather than what the score means. So NPS or CSAT or whatever. I hear all these things about, NPS is dead. NPS is not dead. Just the way we've implemented it is very flawed in a lot of cases. And we get so obsessed with the score, we can actually show in our data the number 2 reason why CX teams tell us they invest in CX is to improve their CX score. If you unpack that for a moment, they're investing to improve the score, not to actually help customers.
There you go.
Yeah, and that says it all for me. When I read that the first time, I had to double take to go, what
are you freaking kidding me?
Right. So you have that challenge. But it was when we were talking, it reminded me of something we did a couple of years ago. We ran and this is about setting and exceeding or missing expectations.
Yeah.
We ran a CX safari, and we did it we were running a customer event in a hotel just over the road from King's Cross and St. Pancras. So we thought we'd do something interactive, and we'll take all the guests out and we'll send them out to buy coffee. And we assigned different brands to everybody. And, someone got Hotel Chocolat, someone got Costa, and one group got Greg's. And they were like, "Oh, really?" And they came back going, "That was brilliant. because we had like such low expectations, but they crushed it.
Yeah.
The quality of the product wasn't amazing, but the quality of the experience was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something we all learned from that around what you're expecting versus what you get. And sometimes the more luxury expectations they fail to meet, but the basic expectations, some of the brands you thought might make it or wouldn't make it rather, actually crushed it.
And so I think that brings us back to kind of some of the things you're talking about, those themes that we were talking about, this idea about brand and customer experience. I mean, and that actually, what is your data telling you about why businesses need to invest in both? It's not just in this, but you actually have to take this, again, it's almost back to basics, kind of the holistic view of this about setting and managing expectations, but also delivering against them as well.
Yeah, we'll put a couple of links in the show notes because we've published some of this in blogs and I'm mentioning frameworks and things so you can see some of the graphics. But there's a report we put out just for Christmas, which is introducing Forrester's Brand Experience Index, and it is bringing together the CX and the brand energy indexes. The preliminary research we've done, like I said, we're going to launch this in the US event in a couple of months' time, but the preliminary research suggests that depending on which industry you're looking at, we can see anywhere from about 2.2 times revenue uplift, which is like airlines and some firms like that kind of end, all the way up to about 3.5 times revenue uplift. That was investment firms right at the top.
Right.
And so you're talking about a significant revenue driver if you're just doing this. I mean, I make it sound really easy. It's not, but essentially just like set expectations, meet expectations. Hooray, 3 times revenue. Yeah. Obviously, it's more complex than that. But at a basic level, the data is really supporting strong alignment between brand and experience really drives growth.
Just to be kind of clear, when you say like between a 2x and a 3x uplift, is that uplift on the kind of the investment, or is that actually total kind of revenue?
Growth.
Okay, fine. Because they're just going to go and say, like, well, if that's 2 times like double your revenue, double your revenue, like going, my word.
Yeah.
There's
aligned firms experience 2 to 3 times the revenue growth. Sorry to be
okay, that's fine. I just because I was a bit like, what?
Yeah, they don't. No, we don't magically double in size. If we could promise that, then we'll print our own money.
Yeah, and so within all of that, I mean, what's your kind of data also telling you about sort of, because you mentioned earlier on about sort of kind of customer journeys and things, and customer journeys is a thing that's been hanging around for a long time, and yes, they're important. And we talk about mapping and orchestration and identification where pain points and stuff. I mean, what is your data telling you about kind of which journeys matter the most?
Yeah, you're kind of getting to my favorite topic now. So the thing we are launching at the EMEA event is our journey benchmark. So the story behind this is you probably get asked this as well, but we get asked so many times by clients, which journey matters the most? And who is the best at X? Who's the best at complaints handling? Who's the best at onboarding?
Right. Okay.
In my industry, globally, or across all industries, etc. And we can't answer it. So we thought, well, let's actually work out how we can answer it. So we took one of our consumer surveys that we used to run all across Europe, and we dumped it all into 3 industries in 2 countries to get a big sample size to see what we could do rather than spreading it thinly. What could we do if we had a huge sample size in the UK and in France for banking, telco, utilities? Because they have similar characteristics. They're kind of recurring revenue businesses with service components. So we wanted to try and compare like onboarding in telco versus onboarding in utilities, or moving house. What would that look like?
Yeah.
And we found some really interesting stuff. But before I do that, there's also another piece of research we did last year where we looked at the the revenue impact of NPS in different industries of creating or increasing the amount of promoters you have versus reducing the amount of detractors you have. So is it a 1 point increase in NPS, right? But what happens if you remove detractors versus what happens if you create more promoters?
Right.
That showed us some interesting stuff, and it quite aligns with the journey research as well. So what we found is that across the 11 industries we studied, only airlines and investment firms get more by making more promoters. Every other industry gets a bigger bang for its buck if you reduce the number of detractors, so you reduce the negative experiences.
Yep.
So the journey benchmark backs this up. We wanted to answer who's best at. So the data suggests that problem resolution is the journey that's most predictive of relationship success across all 3 industries. It's very hard to say causal, as you can probably understand, but in terms of what we try to work out is what what metrics and which journeys at that kind of journey level are going to be most predictive of an overall relationship increase in customer sentiment towards the brand. So it backs up the NPS data. It's problem resolution that actually really going to drive your customer relationship. Kind of goes back to what you said at the start, like fixing people's problems and just ironing out the issues.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is because people understand that, and maybe we've been taught this because of the state of service and experience just generally over kind of like our lifetimes, as it were, is that it's oftentimes not perfect. Sometimes it's great, but oftentimes it's not perfect. And actually, things happen, mistakes happen, and the world is not linear; it's squiggly, and oftentimes the random stuff's going to happen, and things need to get fixed. And I think we understand that, and therefore we lean into this idea of like, well, if you can help me fix this, I'm not going to hold you responsible for the fact that something's necessarily failed. I understand that things fail from time to time.
Yeah.
But I want you to kind of to pay attention to the idea of like, well, resolve it. And if you help me resolve it, as you say right at the beginning, quickly and effectively and efficiently and those sort of things, then I'm going to be good with that.
Yeah, and I mentioned when I talked about the brand energy earlier on, we measure fit, salience, and trust. And trust is really interesting. So trust feels like something you can't measure, but actually we have a framework that breaks it down into 7 different levers, like dependability, accountability, transparency, things like that. So we can measure how transparent you feel the organization is, how dependable it is, etc., and create a score. And what we find is the higher that the trust index score goes, the more likely customers are to say positive things like, I will forgive this brand mistakes, or I will, recommending things like that. But the forgiving the mistakes is one that popped into my head as you were talking about that. Because it's sort of trust we define as the expectation of a positive outcome in a relationship. Right. And the more that you trust the brand, the more you're going to forgive it a mistake.
Yeah. Let me say this old, it's like what do they call it? It's an emotional bank account type of idea.
Yeah, we've used that idea before. Yeah, the piggy bank of like putting it in and then to withdraw
if
it goes wrong. Yeah.
If you're consistently doing it and then putting in deposits in the bank account, but then all of a sudden, if you're in credit, then people will forgive you and allow you to kind of like to debit the account sort of thing. But as long as you're still in credit, then you're good. I mean, it's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating about this is that everything we've talked about, most people are going to listen to and go, well, obviously, A, it's hard, and B, we can prove it. Yeah. This is what I like about these indexes and bringing them together is actually we've got data that backs up with big sample sizes like globally that you improve trust, you increase the likelihood of customers forgiving you mistakes. Yeah. You improve emotional engagement, you increase loyalty metrics. We can show all this sustainably.
But I think that's the kind of thing is that it's about focusing kind of people. You talk about doing the basics kind of well, and the data all supports this. And it's, I guess what I would say is that you've got to figure out what the basics are for your particular industry and your particular customers. Yep. And it's kind of relative. It's not necessarily what you think the basics are. It's actually you have to dial into what you think, your customers kind of think the basics are, and then go and attend to those.
That's why I am such a fan of journey mapping, because I think it forces you to take that outside in viewpoint about what is your customer trying to achieve, what is their goal, and we define a customer journey as the customer's path and perceptions on the way to achieve a goal. Yeah. And if you break that down, that is not, I've seen so many journey maps where you look at them and you go like, that's a process map. That's your internal process. And you got internal process metrics and things like customer outcome. Customer buys more of our products. Like that's not a customer outcome. That's your outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
So take a step back. And my ex-colleague Harley Manning wrote Outside In years ago. And that single phrase outside in has lived with me ever since we published that book. Yeah.
And so when we talk about kind of customer journeys and customer journey mapping, a lot of people now might flip to, what technology should we kind of using? And how we can integrate it and help us kind of deliver better outcomes and customer experience outcomes. But I just wanted to ask you, what's your viewpoint on what should practitioners be keeping in mind when they think about technology and designing sort of these more resilient experiences for customers?
I think, In terms of, well, the technology that customers are going to use, I think is fascinating. So there's a whole conversation about CX technology and CFM and journey management, those kind of things. But actually, where we started from on that complexity thing, it's another topic we're going to address at the summit.
Okay.
So another piece of research we're launching is, I mean, we can come on and talk about CX technology if you want as well, because that's obviously a key part. But we're launching another framework around future of digital experiences.
Okay.
So we're looking, and this is building on research we've already done. So we're looking at the evolution of kind of current mainstream and future emerging touch points and interfaces and interaction modes. So we're all used to mobile now and GUIs and like text and things, but we increasingly voice. We've got AI, we've got chat. There's things coming like haptic, like whatever else is out there. And the challenge we have now is, I was literally just looking at this data because I'm kind of trying to plan the intro to how I open the conference. And we're seeing this. This has always been true. This pace of change thing. We've always been able to say, "Oh, the pace of change is getting faster." But again, we genuinely think the cycle times for adoption is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. We're looking back at data from 2021 and looking at what was early adopter behavior then is now mainstream behavior because COVID's hugely accelerated digitization.
Yeah.
So what early adopter behavior looks like now? How fast will that become mainstream behavior? How fast we can see early adopters using voice on a daily basis to control devices, to update accounts, manage transactions, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's mainstream. Yeah, that is very much a kind of progressive pioneer segment. But in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, how fast is that going to become mainstream? Because we can see that accelerating.
Yeah.
So again, this whole future of experiences research is looking at things like our empowered segmentation that I mentioned a little bit. We have a thing called the moments map, which looks at consumer use versus preference. So very often you see stats like 70% of consumers use blah, but actually when you look at which do they prefer, there's obviously a strong misalignment. So again, like we're saying about understanding what customers want to do, we're trying to encourage that outside-in lens on just because you put something on a channel and people use it doesn't mean they want it. They may want something different. You may be forcing them to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I mean, this is a slightly contrary sort of like view. Tell me what you think of it, whether it's kind of mad or not. But I think sometimes there's this kind of idea that says, oh, we have to be where our customers are at.
Yeah.
So everybody's going like, oh, we have to be on all these channels. And I said to people, well, actually, here's a slightly contrary view, which is in the physical realm, we know that we will travel further for a better experience. Like, for example, say there's a restaurant. I always use restaurant examples because they're just easy to understand. So say there's a restaurant that is like half a mile away, which is it's all right, maybe, but there's another one which is 3/4 of a mile away, which is going to be great. The question I would ask people is like, would you travel the extra distance to go to kind of the better restaurant? And invariably people will say, yeah, well, of course, why would I go to a meh restaurant when I can go a little bit further to go to an even better one? So we know, and I think the data sort of supports is that we will travel further, expend more effort for a better service, a better experience, right? We know that in the physical domain, but yet sometimes I think we often we forget that when we think about the digital domain. And people are trying to be everywhere, but not necessarily focused on anywhere, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at the start, where the digital transformation reaction, which started like 10 plus years ago, but massively accelerated over the last 3 to 4 years, has said, put every single interaction on every single channel everywhere, create allow people to do everything everywhere. And it results in just mess because you can't. But I think I'd counter a little bit what you said with, I think context is massively important.
Sure.
So to use your example, if you're on a rush, you might choose the local restaurant, even though you know it's not as good. I'll go back to my coffee analogy.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things we did with that as well was to overlay context on top of the coffee journey. So imagine you're a King's Cross station, you're a commuter and you're late for your train and you want a receipt. That's a whole context about that experience.
Yeah.
Versus you're a mum with a kid and your train's been cancelled, you got 2 hour wait. Those two consumers both want a cappuccino.
Yeah.
And they both want a nice cappuccino, but they have really different contexts in what's going on in their lives. So they will make different choices, even though that mum or the kid might also be a commuter on a different day. They're not different people; they just have a different context.
Yeah.
And we fail to bring that into the digital experiences as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've used an example for years now. And when mobile first started, it was very obvious. And myself and a number of our colleagues have used this over and over again. So you're going to get on a plane. You've got your mobile boarding, but you've got your app on your phone. I'm pointing on my phone now for the purposes of podcasts. So you got your app on your phone, and you open up the airline app, and you go to the check-in.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on when it is in relation to your flight and where you are, the airline knows something.
Mm-hmm.
If you're standing at the check-in desk and the flight's 2 hours away, they know something about you. If the flight closes in 5 minutes and you're 20 miles from the airport, they know something different about you based on location, geolocation and time, data, context. Very, very few brands do anything with that. And that's just a basic example of being capable of for ages.
Yeah.
So I think and I think AI is going to become a real accelerator here, because our ability to crunch that data and do something with it and create a next best experience is massively accelerating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I think there is a world of potential and adding that kind of context dimension kind of to that is as an important consideration, I think. But I do still think that my broader kind of point is that some people just go and almost like follow the crowd.
Oh yeah,
and they kind of get going, oh, you need to be everywhere, doing everything, kind of like on all kind of things, and you're like, as you say, it just creates a bit of a mess.
Well, it creates a sameness as well. It's hard to differentiate if your boss is telling you, well, our competitors just launched this thing, so we've got to do it.
Yeah, well, exactly. There is no kind of art or difference kind of in that. But I wanted to also ask you, because actually it's not just about data and technology and journey maps and things. So you're also going to be talking about the role of, culture, kind of, and what plays in that. I mean, tell me about kind of what you're going to be talking about there, what your research is kind of like finding about the kind of the role of organizational culture, and maybe also kind of leadership in its role in that as well, because I think there are two dynamics, sort of vectors, call them what you will, kind of like that play a massive role, I think, in all of the achievement of positive outcomes in all of this.
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of nicely teed up the split in the conference, in the summit, where day one is very much about total experience and how you will increasingly enable that total experience through digital. Day two, we kick off with culture, measurement, and then move into leadership. So we're kind of trying to tell a story about the big change, the macro change we see coming, all the way down to what we want to leave the audience with is like, what do you do about it? Bring it to you as a person and you as a leader. How are you going to drive this change? But so I've mentioned a bunch of research frameworks, and as I said, we'll put some of these in the notes so you can actually look at them, because it's hard to describe a framework in words. But we have a framework called Culture Energy, and this came from a question we kept getting asked, which is like, how do we create a culture of fill in the blank? Well, that could be innovation, collaboration, resilience, blah, blah, blah. But it's like broadly, how do we create a culture of something that we don't currently have? We want to change the culture to be something else. Usually in our world, customer experience, it's culture of customer centricity. So that's where we kind of go most. So the goal here was like figuring out what makes an adaptive culture, for instance, different from a creative culture or different from a collaboration culture. What can we measure and how can we understand what are the drivers internally and what that looks like? So this has gone back to work we did in about 2022, I think it was. So this has been around for a while. The thing we're doing this year is bringing in the role that metrics play in driving the right or possibly the wrong culture.
Right.
So I mentioned my MPS thing earlier on. So for instance, we know that the number two reason why firms tell us they invest in CX is to improve the CX score, to improve NPS.
And if you tracked all that back, it was because they've been incentivized to do that. And
right, exactly. That's what we want to unpick. So you think about NPS is an outcome metric, but it's not an impact metric. So most firms, and I'm not ragging on NPS because actually it's fine if you do it well, but most firms will kind of measure it and go like, great, we measured it. aspirationally, firms try to get to what's the dollar value of an increase in NPS, which is an impact metric. What they fail to get to, though, is that we're still just measuring outputs. What we're not measuring is the inputs, and what we're not looking at is the activities and the actions that actually drive that change. So to really change a culture, you've got to change the rituals, the artifacts, the behaviors of people on a daily basis. And that's the inputs and the actions that result in NPS improving, which results in more revenue.
Yeah.
So we're trying to wind all the way back to like, how do you break down the activities that your people do, like your tone of voice training in a contact center, or the way you design the website, the way you create flows through the mobile app.
Yeah.
Those are the inputs in terms of what your employees are doing to drive the right customer behavior.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating to illustrate kind of that about how NPS used badly is just creates, it just almost destroys the memory of an experience. When you, and I'm sure people got other different examples, but like, I remember one where if you go to like some sort of mobile phone providers, their shops, and you might be looking for a new plan or a new phone or whatever, and then afterwards they'll say, you're going to get sent this survey, but it'd be great if you give me a 9 or a 10.
Yeah,
because that's
score begging.
Yeah, that's kind of like how I get rewarded, because I get my bonus on the top of that. And you're like going, that's just like so wrong.
Yeah, color coded, 10s in green, 3 to 5s in red, whatever. So there's a story with this. We had a story from a while ago of a car dealership in the US where they were being bonused on NPS. So the behavior they started adopting was, can you fill in the survey, please? Here's a free hat. Here's a free T-shirt. Right. So they're giving revenue away in order to get better scores because their bonuses are getting paid. So there's kind of this, absolute tension. So this is why we tried to answer this question. It's like, what's the original concept was, what are essentially the doors you go through and close behind you when you decide that you're going to do this thing, that you're closing cultural doors behind you. We're going to pay your bonus based on NPS. Slam, you've now shut a bunch of things off and it can now not happen. And you can't backtrack that, or it's very hard to backtrack.
Yeah.
So this is like the concept of this kind of research is like, what are the kind of break points or moments that you're going to commit to something that you then can't wind back from, and have you just closed the wrong door on you? Yeah.
I mean, and it goes back to that sort of big, the bigger point around kind of what are the outcomes you want to drive.
Yeah,
and then to work back from that. But again, you talked about this story around starting with the total sort of experience and then moving on to culture, organizational culture, and then into leadership. I mean, what sort of things specifically should leaders? What sort of things skills should they be developing, or behaviors that they should be adopting to try and drive and manage this sort of change?
So we're bringing over a couple of really cool people, colleagues of mine, James McQuivey and Katie Tynan from the US, who don't get to come to Europe very often. James runs our future work team in Forrester, and Katie's one of our key analysts. And Katie's going to be our closing keynote, and she's going to talk about how every leader needs to become a change leader. And that's really the kind of core of it. So there's a stat which we use, which between the years of 2019 and 2023, executives globally reported 183% increase in the amount of change they have to manage. I don't know how we actually measure that. It's self-reported, but essentially it's a sentiment that every organization is undergoing more and more and more change. And currently, 70% of change initiatives fail. It's a data point that's well used. There's research from Mark Hughes at the University of Brighton Business School, published a really well-researched article on the topic, which, again, we can share a link to. But it's kind of showing that most firms fail at change, and I can definitely reflect that through my career in various different companies. One of the things that I've mentioned this earlier on, the kind of activities, outcomes, impact. That's based on the theory of change or logic model. So if you can go look at the NHS, they use this quite extensively, and there's a kind of very robust model there that looks at how you create, how you understand your constraints and inputs, how you model activities in order to achieve the goal, how you measure the outcomes, and how you drive the right impact. And it's a chain, right? But what we're trying to look at how every leader needs to embrace this concept of theory of change, how they need to drive change in their organization, because it's a volatile world we live in, and it's not going to get any calmer in the next few years. Yeah,
that's perfect. So, Martin, I think that's all I have for now. Unless, before I ask you some quick fire questions, anything else you want to highlight before that we've missed out?
Yeah, we started talking at the top of this about what's the conference about. It's also about interaction.
Yeah.
So we've heard over the years more networking, more hands-on. I really want to say that we called it CX Summit EMEA. It's been CX Forum in the past. It's had various different iterations, but don't expect to show up and just sit and watch us talk. This is very much a learning experience, a hands-on experience. We're running an interactive, immersive experience around persona development, journey mapping. It's all. I'm not going to spoil it. Actually, come and find out what it's about. But it's themed. So we lead you through an experience to collaborate on creating these assets and why they're important. We've got sponsors doing showcases and like showing kind of real use cases of their products. We got workshops, tons of workshops, tons of interaction, roundtables, networking, come and meet the analysts. Really, we're trying to get away from this idea of old school conference of we sit you in a dark room for 2 days and preach at you. This is really about getting hands on and doing stuff and learning.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we put a discount code and also the links to all that sort of stuff in the show notes and stuff. So thank you for that. So just to wrap up, a few quick fire questions.
Yes, I was expecting this.
Boiling it all down. Martin, your best advice for somebody listening in that wants to improve their customer and employee experience. I mean, what's the headline? What's the bullet point?
Stop admiring your problems. Start driving change. Start small, control the scope, pick a product, pick a service, pick one use case, do journey mapping, identify the problems, benchmark where you are, change something, see what happens, measure what happens. Start small, control your scope.
Fantastic. Thank you. Second question is, who do you think's crushing it right now? Who's taking a kind of like a punk approach to kind of like the customer experience and just going, look at them, and they could be any sort of brand. Doesn't really matter. It could be a small or big brand or whatever. You just go like, they're just doing something different, but they're nailing it.
I'm going to refer you to that. I'll answer the question, but I'm first going to refer you to the blog I wrote a couple of weeks ago around UK government and my punk credentials, so you can go and have a look at that. But okay. Hands up, I'm more 90s grunge than punk. But for me, so the essence of punk, right, is counterculture, counter to norms, and stripped back simplicity. So it's like bass, guitar, drums, boom, go 3 minutes, really quick. So I say Octopus.
Okay.
I absolutely love the brand. Massive focus on simplification, massively stripped back experience, laser focus on what they want to do. They do it quickly, they do it fast, and they do it no nonsense. You got their website, there's literally guitar, bass, drums there. There's like 3 things on the website because it's all you need. Yeah. So that's my punk CX brand.
Love it. And then a final kind of question, because like you said earlier, that we're in a volatile world, and I think there's we're in this kind of almost perpetual kind of doom scrolling kind of cycle right now. And so I'm looking to finish, and I have been for the last kind of few months, finish these conversations on a good news story. So Martin, can you give me a good news story, please?
I'm going to give you a good news bit of advice rather than story, and I put this on LinkedIn on Sunday and managed to get about 3,000 clicks on the post instantly because I put a picture of my dog on there. I went for a walk and I took a picture of the dog, and I got a dog 2 years ago when we moved to the country, and it's been so good for mental health and my well-being and everything. We've had a beautiful weather in this country. We're both in the UK. It's been amazing for the last 3 weeks. It's been sunny. So I just think like my good news story isn't so much a story. It's just advice. Get out there, walk the dog, get out in the sun, go exercise. Just like stop doom scrolling. I swear I just deleted the news app on my phone a few months ago, and I feel so much better for it.
Good. Well, that's great advice. So, and yeah, we should all do that. Spend less time kind of doom scrolling and kind of like
you can't control it. You can't control it. So focus on what you can control. You can walk the dog and you can have a great time, or stroke the cow, whatever it is. Just focus on the things that bring you joy.
Awesome. Martin, that's all I have for today. Just want to say thank you so much for spending some time with me today and sharing your insights and experience. Tell us all about the upcoming kind of summit. Good luck with that. Hope it all goes kind of well. And yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you for the time. Great to meet you.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.